I want to talk to you about how to make a competitive application to Oxford or Cambridge. Quick bit of history lesson. Some of you might know, some of you might not know, but Cambridge is the fourth oldest surviving university in the world. We were founded in 1209. Oxford would be the oldest surviving university in the UK. They're founded just before us. And a lot of what I'm going to talk about is applicable to Oxbridge applications as well. So just to spare me having to say, this is also true for the University of Oxford. Just basically everything that I'm going to talk about is the same for Oxford. If there are any key differences, I will try to remember where they are and flag them to you. But Cambridge is got a global reputation for being a fantastic university, and students come from across the UK and the world. And I think one of the interesting things about coming to Cambridge to study is that you will genuinely meet people who are from all different types of backgrounds from across the UK and from all across the world. And I think that's one of the lovely things about the college environment, is that you get to meet people, have interesting discussions, both within your subject, but also outside of your subject, about people who've got completely different viewpoints, completely different ways of thinking about a certain type of issue or problem. I think that's a really enriching part of studying at somewhere like Cambridge, is that opportunity to meet those different types of people. And we offer 30 courses, which isn't that many. And as I'm sure as you all start to do a little bit of research into where you want to go and what you want to study, you'll realize that offering 30 courses isn't that much. Certainly, some of the big universities offer almost 100 courses in some instances. Now, the reason why we offer so few is partly because we don't have so many of those trendy degrees or the more modern type of degrees, but it's also to do with the fact that within each subject, there's an incredible amount of breadth. So you might have heard or remember from this morning, where Graham was talking about the different sort of options you can take. And I'll deal with that in a bit more detail in a moment. But I think within every course, and archaeology is no different, you've really got a breadth of papers, a breadth of topics and subjects that you can study. And that's something we really pride ourselves on at Cambridge, is giving undergraduates that breadth to really be able to explore their degree and ultimately find what they want to specialize in. And another interesting thing about Cambridge is that we're a small university. Again, some students find this quite surprising when they find this out, but in each year across all the colleges, there are only around about just over 3,500 students. In total, there's about 13,000 students or undergraduates here at Cambridge across 4 years of undergraduate study. And to put that into context, a big university like Manchester would be a good example. They can take up to 14,000 students in their first year alone. So some of those big UK universities are sort of 3 times the size of somewhere like Cambridge. 2 main reasons for that. One is to do with the way in which we teach. It's called the supervision system. I will talk about that in a bit more depth in a second. But it's also, the other reason is that if you come to a Cambridge college, you'll be guaranteed a student bedroom for the entire length of your undergraduate degree. And so because of that, there is a limit on the number of bedrooms available. So therefore, we're limited in how many offers of study we can make. And then the last thing, sort of as a summary, is worth knowing, is that we're a collegiate university. So a collegiate university, there are 3 types of university in the UK. You have a city university, and that's where you have sort of a core hub of university buildings in the center of a city, but then other teaching facilities, accommodation, other facilities, sports pitches, they'll be spread out through a city. So you have to sort of travel between different sites. And a good example of that would be any of the London ones. So Imperial, UCL, King's are good examples of city universities. You have a campus university. So a campus university would be everything that you would need as a student in one geographical zone. So you could, in theory, never have to leave your campus as a student, because everything you'd ever need would be in this one place that you need it. And then you've got your collegiate universities, and there are 4 in the UK. There is Cambridge, Oxford, Durham, and Lancaster, but we're mainly going to be focusing on the collegiate experience of what it's like at Cambridge and Oxford. And the way to think about what a collegiate university is you have the colleges, which are essentially like mini campuses. So each college has its own teaching room, student accommodation, cafeteria, dining hall, sports facilities, student bar, libraries, etc., etc. So just like what you'd get on a big campus university like Warwick, you would get it in a college here at Cambridge. And you have the colleges who come together with the faculties, where you sort of do your learning, where the teaching is organized, and they come together to make up the University of Cambridge. That's sort of what at the heart of what a collegiate university is. And your college is very much at the center of your university experience at Cambridge or Oxford. It is where you will live, it's where you'll socialize, it's where you will get involved with, in extracurricular activities. So every college, as you heard with the undergraduates, with Freddie's virtual tour, every college has its own clubs and set of clubs and societies for you to get involved in addition to the wider university clubs and societies, which have students from all the different colleges who join them. And it's where you'll have some of your teaching. So depending on whether you pick an option paper taught by a college academic, you might be taught in college, but if your option paper is taught by someone at St. John's or taught by someone at St. Cat's or taught by someone at Pembroke, you would find yourself going to those colleges for your supervisions. So supervisions, what is a supervision? So I mentioned that's the way in which we like to teach. A supervision is you, possibly one other student, and the academic. Now, they might be a world-class expert in the field who's been teaching for 40 years. It might be a third-year PhD student who's about to go into academia, and every type of academic in between. But it is an incredibly powerful way to learn about your degree. You'll be having interesting, in-depth, critical discussions or analytical discussions about your essays or about your lab work. And that sort of contact time, that privileged contact time with academics, with those world experts, those leaders in their field, you only get that at somewhere like Cambridge and Oxford. And in something like archaeology, you would have a minimum of one supervision a week. So it's a regular contact time. And that's on top of lectures, that's on top of your practical work, that's on top of lab work, that's on top of field work. So it's a lovely sort of bonus additional thing that you get if you come to Cambridge or Oxford. The colleges provide an incredible amount of support. So there's academic support. So in addition to your sort of teaching by an academic, everyone will have a director of studies, and you met Professor Graham Barker, who is our director of studies in archaeology, and they are there to basically supervise your progression through the degree. Okay, and you would go to them with any academic problem that you might have. If in the case of Joe Philbrook, your academic director of studies, Graham might be telling you you've got to work a bit harder and do less fun things, but ultimately they're there just to help you through your degree. In terms of welfare, every college has a welfare committee. Every college has dedicated staff members and academics who are there to provide whatever welfare support you might need, and that ranges from a college nurse, trained mental health professionals. There are undergraduate welfare support officers. There is the chaplain. Everybody has a personal tutor. A personal tutor is an academic based in your college, but who doesn't teach or who wouldn't teach you or be involved in the teaching of you, who you would go to with any other problem outside of your degree. So we call that the tutorial system here. And again, the colleges really make sure that we try and look after as best as we can our students. I think that's one of the standout features of coming to a collegiate university like Oxford or Cambridge. And then lastly, and arguably most importantly in many ways, there's a lot of financial support. So Cambridge has something called the Cambridge Bursary Scheme now. That is assessed on household income, and you can receive up to £4,500 a year as a bursary, so you don't have to pay it back. And then in addition to that, colleges have lots of different types of funds that you can apply for. So Joe, who you saw, who's currently in Bavaria in Germany, having a nice field walking trip to do with archaeology, he applied for a travel grant to help sort of partly fund that trip. There are IT grants that you can apply for, sporting equipment grants you can apply for. There are student support funds. So if for whatever reason your financial situation suddenly deteriorates in the middle of term, you can apply for some student support directly from your college. Basically, there is a lot available to you. And in addition to that, even if you don't directly receive a grant or a bursary, if you're not eligible, you still benefit from the financial support of a college because nearly everything is subsidized. So the food is subsidized, the accommodation is subsidized, all the sporting facilities are free for you to use, all the facilities are on the whole free for you to use. Even the price of a pint in the bar, as Freddie mentioned on our virtual tour, even that is subsidized. So even though you might not be directly eligible for any of that sort of financial support, you will still benefit from coming to a college at Cambridge or Oxford. Lots of ways to think about how you choose a college. Some are old, some are new, some are right in the middle of town, some are far away, some are very big, some are very small. It's really about just finding the place where you feel most at ease. I think you can overthink these things sometimes. You can worry about admission statistics. You can worry about it being a very, very popular college in terms of admissions or one of the less popular ones. You can try and think, well, you can sort of try and game the system and try and look for patterns in the data. Ultimately, the best thing to do, if possible, is to come on an open day, draw up a little short list of 3 to 5 colleges, have a look around, meet some undergraduates, and try and get a sense of what that college is like from the undergrads themselves. A little bit about Corpus. So we are classed as a medieval college. We were founded in 1352, and we are the 6th oldest Cambridge college. And we're a small college, so we only take between 94 and 96 students per year. We have between 500 and 600 applications to study per year. And I should have mentioned that when you apply to someone like Oxford or Cambridge, you apply to the college, and it's through your membership of the college that you're a member of the university. We're right in the middle of Cambridge. I don't think you can get more central than Corpus Christi. I know for example, lots of medics would pick Corpus because you can wake up at 8:58 and you won't be late for your 9 o'clock lecture. As a benefit, or one of the consequences of being quite a small college, is it is a very close-knit undergraduate body, and all of our undergraduates are very friendly. Hopefully you got a sense of that in chatting, albeit slightly clunkily, with Joe, Eleanor and Freddie earlier today. And then obviously in terms of our directors of studies here, we've got Graham, who most of you will have met earlier today. Graham is a fantastic ambassador for archaeology. He does some really fascinating things. He's really interested in lots of interesting research areas. And I'm sure as well you got a sense of how he was talking about, Joe and Eleanor and Thomas on the call. He really knows the students and they really know him. He's a real asset for us at archaeology here at Corpus. I just want to go over the application process a little bit, and I won't dwell too long on this, but I just want to highlight that everything you have to do, you have to get ready early. So the UCAS deadline to apply to somewhere like Cambridge is mid-October, and this year it will be the 16th of October. Part of the reason why you have to have everything ready earlier than your peers who aren't applying to somewhere like Cambridge or Oxford is because of we have the interviews, which we do in December, and there's also possibly some entrance exams depending on your subject. So basically we have to the drawn out admissions process means we have to start a little bit earlier. So in terms, actually, I'm just going to go back to this slide. What I would just say here, and why do we have this drawn out admissions process? Why do we make you submit additional information? Why do we make you sit an entrance exam? Why do we have an interview? Well, it's because it is a competitive process. So we have in total at Cambridge, we have around about 20,000 applications for about those 3,500 places to study. Everybody broadly has the same GCSE academic track record. Everyone broadly has the same A-level predicted grades. So we have to have these extra things to really help us find those students who've got the real academic potential that we're after. But I will talk about that a bit more in a second. So the structure of the archaeology course here at Cambridge. So in your first year, what we would call part 1, you pick 3 from several core options, and the body of options are: you have world archaeology, you have archaeology in action, you have introduction to cultures of Egypt and Mesopotamia, you can take Babylonian language 1, you can take Egyptian language 1, so both introductory papers to those languages, or you can take humans in biological perspective. And if you remember, Eleanor will be taking Egyptian language 1. That was one of her core papers that she's picked. And the 4th paper you take in your first year can be an additional one from that list, or you can take an optional part 1 paper from psychology, social anthropology, politics, or the sociology option papers. So if you're interested in them, I strongly recommend you go and have a look at the undergraduate website just listed there. They will give you a real breakdown of what papers you can study and when. But in the 2nd and 3rd years, what at Cambridge we would call, slightly confusingly, part 2, you will end up going down one of 4 subject tracks. So you will either go down archaeology, biological anthropology, Assyriology, or Egyptology. And Eleanor suggested the first year she's probably, she hasn't made the decision yet, but she's probably going to go down the Egyptology route. Joe, who the third year who you met, he went down just a straight archaeology track. You can combine archaeology and biological anthropology, and you can combine Assyriology and Egyptology. If you decide to combine those two, you have a lot of choice in deciding what papers you're going to take from each track. But again, if you were interested in finding out a bit more about that, would strongly recommend that you go to the archaeology faculty website, where there'll be an incredible amount of detail on all the different papers and options you can take. There is what we would call a college registered assessment for archaeology. And it's not like a pure entrance exam. What will happen here is we will have decided to interview you. And as part of the interview process, we would like you to take a little assessment for us. And they are partly used to help us decide who to offer a place to. But I should add here that we look at all of the things you submit to us. So your personal statement, teacher ref, academic track record, your interview, and your college registered assessment. We look at that all together to try and make a decision on whether to offer you a place to study. And in terms of the structure itself, the archaeology one is 1 hour long. It is based on an unseen text, an unseen source. And then you will have to answer another 2 essay questions from a choice of 4. Okay, so that's sort of the structure of it. So it's not long. It's not like you'll be sitting there doing 3 hours, but there are some interesting parts to it, an interesting structure to it. You will also have to submit, at most colleges, you have to submit at least 1 piece of written work, like standard coursework essay, but we'll have a 1,500 word limit. And broadly, and it does vary slightly from college to college, but we like that to be, just like I said, a regular marked piece of classwork or a class essay that you will have done for your A levels. There are 4 past papers on the university website. I would familiarize yourself with the format and the structure, and the crucial thing with it is to practice under timed conditions. Okay, that's, if I was to say one thing, that why do people struggle or perform weaker or not perform as strong as they should do in an admissions assessment, it's almost always because they run out of time. So if you are going to have a look at those past papers, strongly recommend that you sort of eventually decide to do 4 mock exams at some point over the summer or in the September of your GCSEs, A levels, or before you go into the last year of 6th form. Excuse me. And the assessment is designed to help us, or it's designed to sort of allow you to show your ability to think analytically. It's designed to help us show your ability to produce a coherent argument. You know, can you write persuasively? To showcase your ability to select and use evidence appropriately, and also the ability to address a question directly and clearly with precision and clarity. Okay, so test of almost really sort of what we might think is like the general soft skills in humanities that is applicable across all the arts and humanities subjects, but it will be specifically about the subject or topic to do with something about archaeology. The interview, everyone often worries about the interviews, but interviews are just simply designed to stretch and challenge you. I won't dwell too long on this, but at their core, an interview is just trying to find out 2 things. How do you think about something? Okay, what is your thought process? How do you approach a problem? And the second thing that they're trying to find out is, how do you cope when you get given something new or something that you haven't been taught before? You know, your ability to take on board new ideas, new information, to look at something that you've never seen before and come up with interesting ideas. That is often the best indicator of your academic potential that we have. If you are interested in seeing what they might look like, there are lots of interesting resources online. Would strongly recommend you only look at sort of official things, either by the university, the department, or the college. Students or there are lots of videos of undergraduates talking about their interview experience. They are most students are terrible at remembering what happened in their interview. So I would direct you towards, something official. And also, once we get through to sort of late summer, early September, even possibly October, lots of colleges will often run admissions webinars and workshops where you can find out more about the interviews and possibly even watch a mock interview. So what do we look for? So I mentioned that it was a competitive application. And broadly speaking, and I think one of the interesting things is Graham spoke about this quite a lot, is we are just trying to find students who have enthusiasm, motivation, and potential. That is really at the core of the admissions process, what we're trying to find, or hopefully that's designed to highlight those students who have a genuine enthusiasm for archaeology. Like, you haven't just sort of done a little bit of work and thought like, oh yeah, archaeology sounds like a laugh. People who have really already started to throw themselves into the study of it. We're looking for evidence of your motivation for hard work. Any degree at Cambridge, including archaeology, is hard, and we do expect a lot of you. I would conservatively estimate that arts and humanities students at Cambridge or Oxford probably work 8 times harder than anyone else in the UK studying the same thing. So I like to see a little bit of evidence of that in your sort of paper application. And then, of course, as we've all been talking about, I'm looking for those students that got that academic potential. And I'll talk about that a little bit more in the next slide. And I just want to add again, or just reiterate really, that the decisions we make are holistic. So we don't prioritize one bit of the admissions process. We look at taking everything together to try and sort of get the best or most rounded view of you as a student. And we contextualize every application. So we take into account your academic journey, we take into account your socioeconomic background, and we try and take into account any individual personal circumstances that you might have told us about. Now, supercurricular study is the key bit of how we work out, or part of the sort of the process of how we work out your academic potential. Now, some of you will have heard of this before, some of you haven't, but essentially it's an academic engagement that goes above and beyond a student's current syllabus level, and crucially, independently explored. If you are working with things that stretch and challenge you, if you are working with sort of real academic resources on your own, you're not waiting for a teacher, or you don't need a teacher to guide you through it, that's usually a pretty good indicator that you've got some serious academic potential, because you're working with hard things and you don't need to be taught them. And they really will come out in every bit of the admissions process. So they're going to come out in your personal statement. Your teacher might reference them in your teacher reference. They're certainly going to help you when it comes to doing your college registered exam for archaeology. And it's also going to come out in your interview. It probably comes as no surprise, but those students who have read some interesting things, done some interesting work experience, and then who have thought about it, will often come up with good and interesting ideas in their interview. And I should also add as well that in general, supercurricular study will make you better students overall. They will make your A-levels easier, and anything that's going to make your A-levels easier is, I think, to be encouraged. So how best to use your time? You want to have a plan of what you want to explore and what supercurricular resources you'll use. And I will show you later on what that actually looks like. But what I would encourage you to always be is flexible. You might have a really solid idea of exactly what bits of archaeology you're interested in and what you want to research, but you might go to a talk like this, or you might read an article in one of those archaeology journals that Graham was talking about, and you suddenly might discover something new and interesting that really makes you passionate and enthusiastic, but you hadn't originally thought you were interested in it. I would strongly encourage you to pursue that new interest, okay? This is about your A-levels. Nothing is prescribed. You don't have to do any of this. So you want to spend your time really exploring the subject and really getting to grips with sort of those more niche or specialist subjects that are within something like archaeology. Would strongly recommend you keep a supercurricular workbook. Every time you complete a little bit of supercurricular study, listen to a podcast, read an article, go to a talk like this, you should be writing down your thoughts and ideas, your engagement with that resource, even at the most basic level of, did you enjoy it? If yes, why? If no, why? Does it link to anything else you've studied? Are there any other interesting themes or ideas that have come out of that piece of supercurricular study? So cannot recommend that you keep a supercurricular workbook enough. And again, just to chime in with the idea that nothing is prescribed. If you're not enjoying something, if you are not enjoying a lecture, if you're not enjoying a podcast, if you're not enjoying an article, if you're not enjoying a book, make a note in your workbook why you did not enjoy it, because sometimes that is as revealing as why you did enjoy something, and then move on and go and find something that you do find really interesting to work with. Now, the best students, they find time to do some supercurricular study every day. Even if it is only listening to a 15-minute podcast, they will have that discipline to do a little bit of supercurricular study every day. And again, I would strongly recommend that you all do some supercurricular study every day. And then lastly, As you do your reading, you want to not be passive. Okay, you want to be proactive, active in your engagement with the supercurricular study. So, as you read, you want to be thinking about what you're reading. It's not just about the acquisition of knowledge. You want to be asking yourself, interrogating yourself, do I agree with what they're saying? How does that link to something else? Does it disagree with something that I've studied? Has it made me reevaluate something that we were taught at school? And then lastly, and most importantly, if you are able to, find somebody, teacher, parent, brother, sister, mate, whoever it might be, to talk about your ideas. So, you might be lucky and someone else in your school might be interested in archaeology. Fantastic. Go and find them and go and talk to them about your ideas. Okay. In your interview, you're going to have to be able to talk about it. And the only way you get good at talking about your ideas, the only way you get good at talking about your engagement is you have to practice that. Here is a very, very, very non-exhaustive list of some supercurriculars for archaeology. Of course, you are in right now. 2 of the talks are academic in nature. It's not part of your syllabus. It is things that you're never going to have been taught any of these things. So that class as supercurricular study. There are lots of interesting things online for archaeology. I already dropped in the chat previously the one that Graham recommended was sort of the archaeology, the British Archaeology Council. The link was in the chat. But there's the Young Archaeologist Club. There's some really good stuff on the HE Plus website, which is a Cambridge website. There's some really nice archaeology resources you can start using with some questions as well, linked to those resources. A personal favorite of mine, The History of the World in 100 Objects. If you have not listened to this podcast series, you should absolutely do it. It's all freely available on BBC Sounds or on Spotify or on Apple Music or wherever you get your podcasts from. Absolutely fascinating, gripping look at material objects and material culture and what that can tell you about the people that made them. Okay, really interesting. And then if you like some of them, there's also the history of Germany in 30 objects. It's called Memories of a Nation. There's also a history of religion in 25 objects. I think it's 25 objects, all done by the same person, Neil McGregor. He was the former director of the British Museum. Cannot recommend that enough. And then there's also a Women in Archaeology blog, and there's an accompanying podcast series, again, really interesting topics and themes within archaeology. Reading, well, Joe, Eleanor, and Graham all gave you a fantastic recommendation, which was the Renfrew sort of textbook, which I dropped the link in the chat to that. But again, there is so much out there. There's a really nice reading list on the archaeology faculty website. There is so much out there. You've just got to, take a plunge, do some research, and find something you'd be interested in. And then lastly, if you are able to get some work experience, whether that be in a local museum or even on a local archaeological excavation, would really recommend that you try and get some of that. The crucial bit with that, though, is you don't get a smiley face from me when I'm reviewing your personal statement or I'm reviewing your application just by having done it. You have to tell me what you learned. You have to tell me how you engaged with it. You have to tell me whether it linked to something interesting you read. So you don't get any points for just sort of describing. To be honest, you don't get none of these things you should be describing in your personal statement. You should all be telling me interesting things that you think about these things. Okay, so it's not description, it's engagement. And then, of course, strongly encourage you to go and find your own resources. There is a lot out there. When I said plan, this is broadly what I meant. At some point between now and summer, so let's say arbitrarily May half term, you will want to think about what supercurriculars have I already engaged with. Okay, and really think about anything that is related to archaeology that is academic in nature or slightly academic in nature goes on the list. And then you want to think about the themes that might interest you. Okay, so taken as a set, looking at all the things you've worked on so far as a group, what interesting themes would emerge that you would suggest that you are really interested in? Because then once you've got your themes, you can then go and target. You can then go and find those additional supercurricular resources or opportunities or programs that you can then focus on the summer that will help deepen your understanding of the themes that really interest you. And the reason why the themes are important is because the best personal statements are written thematically. They're written about the themes that you are really interested in. And it's a really nice, neat way to then talk about your supercurricular study, which is not just a list. Okay, so at some point, draw up a list of things you're already engaged with, then really think carefully about the possible themes that would emerge for looking at your set of supercurriculars, and then go and do some research and find the resources really help sharpen and develop the themes that you're interested in. The open days are coming up. So Cambridge is the 6th and 7th of July. Oxford is the 28th and 29th of June. Strongly recommend, if you're able to come to them to have a look around at your colleges. There'll be people, undergrads, who can answer your questions. There'll be people like me who can answer questions and really give you a sense or a feel of what it might be like to study at somewhere like Cambridge or Oxford. There's also my email there. I'm happy for you to all have my email, or that's Naomi's email actually, but ultimately it comes to me as well. So if you have any questions about applying for archaeology that we don't get through, or I know in 3 months' time there's a question you're like, why didn't I ask James when I was on the webinar with him, please use that email address and get in contact with us. Right, I will stop waffling away now, and Eleanor will appear out of the dark. Hi, Eleanor. Do we have any questions for me?
Yes, we do. So first off, do all colleges make the same number of offers for each course?
Okay, that's a very good question. The short answer is no. So let's take medicine, for example. At Corpus, we make about 6 offers for medicine a year, whereas at somewhere like Keys, there is 18, 20 offers made for medicine. So it does vary college to college. With something like archaeology, it's actually a lot more standard. So most colleges, or quite a few colleges, will offer 1 place in archaeology. The most places that are offered by any college is 2. So archaeology on the small subjects, that tends to be far more uniform across the collegiate system. So at Corpus, we will have either 1 or 2. Some years we have none. If we have some people who we don't think are good enough, we don't just fill up the place. So currently at Corpus, in 3rd year there's 1, in 2nd year there's 1, and 1st year there's 1. But for the coming round, for the coming year, so the year above you, we have made 2 offers. So we might have 2 archaeologists next year.
Great, thank you. We have another kind of application related question. So someone has asked, would each application to a college take up one of your UCAS application slots, or do they all count as one application? So can you make an application to multiple colleges?
Okay. No, so you have to choose one. And we also make you choose either Cambridge or Oxford, so you can't apply to both. You can make an open application at both universities. So you could say, you know what, I can't decide. I cannot decide between all the colleges. I will let an algorithm randomly assign me to a college. I would strongly recommend that you all do some research and pick a college. I should also add here that in the admissions office, we cannot tell if you have directly applied to us or you've been randomly assigned to us. So in terms of, we don't give preference to people who directly chose, say, for example, Corpus over another college. I just think one of the fun parts of the admissions process, and it should all be fun. If you love archaeology, it will all be fun. One of the interesting parts is finding out about the little quirks and traditions and the different sort of atmospheres of each college. So just do your research and pick one is what I would say, but you can only pick one.
Great, thanks. So next question is there anything in particular that you think makes an application stand out for archaeology? And especially someone has asked about how valuable the EPQ would be for an application.
Okay, very good question. So if I may, I'll start with the EPQ question. So EPQs, I think, in one sense, we don't value them at all, because they will never be included as part of your offer. So we don't recognize it when if we make you an offer to study for archaeology at Corpus, it's most likely going to be, you're going to have to get A-star AA, which is the standard offer for arts and humanities. At some universities, they will say, well, if you want to study archaeology, yes, you need to get AAA. But if you get a very high score on your EPQ, we'll change that to AAB. So they make a conditional offer on the strength of your EPQ grade. Now, we don't do that here. So in one sense, we don't value it, I suppose you could argue. On the other hand, though, I think particularly for something like archaeology, where you can't take an A level in it, is a really useful way. If you certainly write about archaeology in your EPQ, it's a really useful way to showcase your interest and enthusiasm. It's also a nice way to sort of start exploring a particular niche subject with a bit of structure. So rather than just feeling like, well, I'm just going to go to the library and just get every book on archaeology, an EPQ will help you sort of structure your approach to the exploration of the subject. But we have students, we've made an offer, in fact, to those 2 students who are coming up to Corpus next year. One does an EPQ, one does not do an EPQ. So it's useful, it might be good, but you're not at any disadvantage if you don't do one. And then what do I look for in terms of like the standout, like what makes you stand out? It feels a bit trite, and we sort of said it a lot today already, but often it is that real enthusiasm for the subject. Now nearly everybody, I suppose you could argue, who is going to apply for archaeology is going to be enthusiastic about it, because you can't take an A level in it. It's not one of those big subjects like law where people just sort of think like, yeah, I want to be a lawyer, so I'll go and study law. So archaeologists tend to be sort of more interested in the subject anyway. But I think that sort of the real, and it's such a cliched word, the passion, really taking a deep dive in things. So you've not only read like introductory textbooks like that Renfrew book we recommended earlier, but you've really drilled down, or dug down, if you excuse the archaeology pun, into an area of sort of specialist interest. And you've really begun to think about your ideas. You're trying to have your own ideas, your own opinions on what you're reading. That will really help you stand out. And what I should just add there, sorry, Eleanor, cutting you off. When I say sort of interesting thoughts and ideas, I don't expect anybody your age to be unique. Okay, it's not your job. You're 17. You're never going to come up with a unique thought. That is what you do when you do your PhD. You're supposed to come up with your unique idea when you're studying for your doctorate. Even at sort of undergrad level, we don't really expect students to start having unique ideas until sort of their end of their 3rd year. So what I mean by coming up, I don't care if you say the same thing that someone has been saying for 15 years. If you say it and you're interested in it and you can be interesting about it, that still counts. So don't worry about, oh God, I've got to have a unique or original idea. That's not what I mean.
Great, thanks, James. So we've got a few questions about the financial aspects of life at Cambridge.
Yeah.
So could you expand a bit on how much a student would typically spend on food, how much a meal would cost, and also, can students work while they're studying?
Okay. So if I may, I'll take the second part because it's the easier question to answer. The short answer is no. You are not allowed to work as a student whilst you're at Cambridge. Why? Are we just being difficult? Possibly. We do like to be difficult sometimes, but the real reason behind it is that you do have to work very hard here, and you do have to work to the point where certainly the admissions tutor and Dr. Frascaspada, the senior tutor, who's our boss, would say, the best students treat it like a job. So essentially you're doing like between 30 and 40 hours of academic work a week. And we would much rather have you socializing, playing sport, being a member of a club or society, being on the JCR committee, helping me do access and outreach events, than working. So we think it's, from a welfare point of view, we don't want you to be working loads in the library and then having to go and work shifts in a bar somewhere, because you've got to come to Cambridge and also enjoy the uni experience of going out, meeting people and having fun. Now, because of that, there is also, we have the financial support available to students who need it, but also lots of our students have jobs outside of term time back at home. So term is only 8 weeks long, and you do 3 terms of 8 weeks. So in fact, you actually are not at college for more the time than you are at college, and the vast majority of students have a job in the long vacations. So that's sort of, are you allowed to have a job? And I should also say there are actually various paid opportunities for undergraduates at colleges. So for example, if you help me with a summer school, that's paid undergraduate work. The development office do fundraising campaigns of which students work on the telephone and telethon, and you are paid for that. So there are paid opportunities at a college. It's just they rarely ever happen during the academic term time. And then costs. Well, costs always vary on how extravagant a lifestyle that you want to lead, I suppose. I spent a lot on food when I was an undergrad because I ate a lot. I mean, I played a lot of sport and I rode, so you could argue I felt that I had to eat a lot. I was just greedy, and I had never been somewhere. I just went to an ordinary comprehensive school. We didn't have a tuck shop, I went to a college where I could have chocolate and apple turnovers and pies and croissants all the time. So I took advantage of that by eating them all the time. The average cost of a meal, I think Freddie said, is probably around about £4, and that would get you a pretty decent lunch. That would be sort of a hot main, that would be 2 or 3 sides, and if you wanted to have a pudding as well, and at Corpus there is always a choice of 4 puddings. That would actually probably be about £5.50, I reckon. One of the best bits about my job and Eleanor's job is our free lunch. I can assure you that's much appreciated. So, and then again, dinner is roughly the same. So if you were including most of our students would probably actually have their own breakfast. So they would have like cereal or toast they wouldn't go to college to eat that. I don't know, you probably eat for, I don't know, £10 a day, in that ballpark, I think. But the costs and what it afford, like your living expenses, obviously does vary on your lifestyle habits. If you want to eat roasted swan every day, I'm sure you can find somewhere that will cook you roasted swan, but it will be expensive. What I would just say in terms of sort of accommodation costs at Cambridge, you only pay for your room when you're staying in it. So unlike most other rental contracts, you have to sign up for a year. You only pay for the weeks that you are in residence at Cambridge. And so because of that, it's cheap. So the average cost of a room in Cambridge is at the moment just under £5,500 a year. Average cost of student accommodation across the UK is just over £8,000 a year. So significant saving on the accommodation. I've sort of answered that question by not answering really, Eleanor. Is that okay?
I think I'm happy.
Okay.
And I will move on to another question about college choice. So are there any colleges that you would say are particularly good to apply to for archaeology? Maybe they have an interesting historical background, for example, and also which colleges can you actually apply to? Like how many actually let you study archaeology?
Yeah, good question. So the quality of your degree and the quality of your teaching is not affected by what college you go to. So it's not like there is one college like Corpus, which is where we have the best archaeologists, so therefore you get the best education. All of the teaching is organized centrally by the faculty. So if let's say you applied to Corpus, but actually you weren't that interested in what Graham taught, and you were more like Eleanor, who was interested in the Egyptology side, you would end up being taught by the Egyptologist academics who are based at different colleges anyway. So it doesn't matter what college you go to. It doesn't limit your option papers, doesn't limit the quality of your degree and sort of your enjoyment of it. So I wouldn't necessarily say there's like a really good college for archaeology or a really bad one for archaeology. Now, of course, Corpus pay my wages, so I would say come to Corpus. But I think really it's about just trying to find the place where you feel at home. When I picked a college, I drew up a short list of 5. I went to Oxford. I study history, by the way. And I ended up applying to the college, which wasn't even on my shortlist. Just happened to walk into it and it felt right. Bumped into an undergraduate. We had a nice conversation about history. We're still best friends, as good a reason as any. Eleanor went to Oxford. Eleanor, how did you pick Lincoln? St. Anne's, sorry, St. Anne's.
No, I went to Lincoln as an undergraduate.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
And I only toured it because it said in the prospectus that it had the best food. And then I met one of the history tutors and he was just really friendly and great.
Yeah. And that's, if you ask most people, that's how they pick it. Like, did they bump into someone who is friendly? Did they like the feel of it, is what I would say. In terms of where you can and can not study archaeology, if you give me 2 seconds, I can tell you that as I vamp. Is there another question, Eleanor, that I can ask whilst I concentrate on something else for a second? An easy one?
Yes. Well, so on the Cambridge website, it says that the entry requirements for archaeology are A* AA, but you mentioned earlier 2 A stars and an A. So do you feel that it's necessary to have that higher predicted grade?
No, not at all. We have students who are predicted and who get 5 A stars. We have students who they have to get A* AA, and that's what they get. I think we do not we don't rank you according to how many A stars you've been predicted before you in the application process. So I wouldn't worry about that. As long as you can make the standard offer, which is A* AA, then you should think about applying if you are really interested in archaeology. Now let me just see. I now can't. Okay, so at the moment for 2023 entry, archaeology is available at every college except Queen's. So there are 29 undergraduate colleges. You can apply to 28 of them. If you're a woman, you can apply to 26 if you're a man. Okay, next question. Are we done?
We have one more if you have time.
Well, quickly.
Yeah, which is just, can you clarify, when you were talking about early applications, is that at the end of year 12 or year 13?
Oh, so no, sorry. The application deadline for Oxford and Cambridge is the 16th of October. So that will be just before the half term of your year 13 or year 14 if you're in Northern Ireland. Yeah, so you don't have to do it now. Don't worry, you've got plenty of time. But part of the reason why we taught you now and why we encourage you to think about applying now is because to get the sort of like the body of supercurricular study together, for you to really start exploring the subject, you do need time to do that. And if you only start sort of doing the work for that in September or late August, you just won't have enough time to put together a very strong application.